In this lesson of Allen course, we're going to talk about the time period of industrialization and globalization, specifically between the 1750s and the 1900s. This period of time was a key point in history because many events happened and so much went on. We would not have the same world today even if one of these events didn't happen. So today we're going to talk about and go in depth about many important events, like the French and Indian War, the Sugar Act, the beginning and ending of the American Revolution, the Monroe Doctrine, the California Gold Rush, and to finish off this time period, the Civil War. Now, let's go back all the way to 1754 to the French and Indian War. So just by the name of the war, many people assume that the French fought the Indians. But that's actually a common misconception. Actually, the main enemies were the French and the British. They just both had American Indian allies. So as the American colonies started to expand to the west, they came into the first conflict with the French. The first real conflict started when the French moved into the Ohio country and built don't get mad at me, Fort Duquesne. I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyways, right after the construction of the fort was the Battle of Jumonville. This took place on March 28, 1754. After this, there were many battles, such as the massacre of Fort William Henry, the Battle of Quebec, and the Fall of Quebec. The French and Indian War finally ended on March 10th of 1763 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. They finally settled it. Now, there were major consequences of this war. One of them was that it was expensive. In order to pay for this, the British government issued taxes on the colonies. That's when they got into the Sugar Act. The Sugar Act was when the government of Great Britain needed money to pay off the cost of the French and Indian War. They believed that the colonists should help pay for this because fighting was done to defend them. So Parliament passed the Sugar Act, which was a tax on sugar, wine, indigo, and molasses in 1764. The colonists were very angry because they didn't have a say or a choice about this. So they formed a Congress of the American Colonies, aka the Stamp Act Congress. This was to devise a unified protest against the British taxation. Eventually, through hard work and dedication, the Sugar Act repealed in 1766 and was replaced with the Revenue Act in 1766, so the same year, which reduced tax to 1 penny per gallon on molasses imports, British or foreign. Nearly 10 years later, tensions have still been building up over the taxes between the British and the colonial Americans. On the night of April 19, 1775, British redcoats marched onto the Concord in order to seize an arms cache and capture rebel leaders Samuel Adams and John Hancock. This was when Paul Revere famously said, "The British are coming!" Samuel Adams and Paul Revere escaped. But the next day is when it really went down. The battle was known to be the Battle of Lexington and Concord. Neither side wanted to attack, but then a random shot occurred out of the confusion and the battle began. Both sides exchanged fire and many people were killed. That one shot, the confusion shot, was called the shot heard around the world. Then many things went on for many years, like deaths, battles, and finally an agreement. On July 4th, 1776, the Congress officially adopted the final version of the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson wrote it with the help of Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and others. Now, let's talk about the Monroe Doctrine. In 1823, President James Monroe introduced the Monroe Doctrine. This doctrine established the foreign policy of the United States regarding the Western Hemisphere for many years to come. There were two main points of the Monroe Doctrine, and they said that the United States would not allow European countries to start new colonies or interfere with the independent countries in the continents of North America or South America. Second, that the United States would not interfere with the existing European colonies nor get involved with conflicts between the existing European countries. The Monroe Doctrine was very useful and was even added to along the years. After the Monroe Doctrine, the California Gold Rush came. After the Monroe Doctrine came the California Gold Rush. This is a perfect example of diffusion because in 1848, a man by the name of James Marshall was the first person to discover gold in California in the city of Coloma. James was building a sawmill for John Stutter when he noticed some shiny flakes of gold in the river. He told John Stutter about the discovery, but they tried to keep it a secret. It did not work. But soon, the secret diffused, and everyone knew. Many people came to test their luck in hopes of becoming wealthy. In 1848, 6,000 people came to mine and test their luck. In 1949, over 90,000 people arrived. These people were known as the 49ers. Keep in mind that before the gold rush, only 14,000 people lived in California. Not too many years after the California gold rush was the American Civil War. This was the intense part of the American history because our nation wanted to be divided in half, and over 600,000 soldiers died. This Civil War was fought between the southern and the northern states. The southern states didn't want to be a part of the United States anymore because they decided that they would make their own country. However, the northern states wanted to stay one country. When the South broke away, they called themselves the Confederate States of America. The Confederates were worried that as the U.S. expanded, they would gain less and less power. The North was left with 25 states, and they called themselves the Union, to symbolize that they wanted to be united. At the time, Abraham Lincoln was president, and he wanted a stronger federal government, and he was against slavery. The fighting started off on Fort Sumter in South Carolina on April 12, 1861. Many battles occurred, and they were in a war for almost exactly 4 years. The Civil War ended on April 9, 1865, when General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at a courthouse in Virginia. Let's talk about continuity real quick. Continuity is something that has stayed continuous throughout time. A great example of this is how England, because of the Industrial Revolution, represents a perfect example of a continuously improving society. Because of England's economic and naval power, it has been able to advance its technological society more than any other European country. Now, let's talk about change. Change is to make or become different. A great example of this is England's population. Before the Industrial Revolution, 80% of England's population lived in the countryside. This number dropped to 40% when new industries and factories pulled people away from their rural lifestyles and placed them in cities, which later became huge industrial centers. I know, that's a lot of information, but I hope you all enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time on Allen Course. See y'all.